HANSA.newscast, presented by Korean Register, providing the best services, creating a better world by CARE.
Hi, and welcome to HANSA Newscast. I'm Janne Silden, and today I'm joined by Simon Flack, Head of Business Development, Earth Observation and Innovation at Space Norway. Simon, great to have you at our podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So, before we move into maritime surveillance and shipping, I'd like to start with the broader picture. Space Norway is a Norwegian state-owned satellite infrastructure company. When they talk about Earth observation and innovation, what does that actually mean?
Yeah, well, I guess you have to start with the company is a government-owned company, and up until recently it was a government-mandated company, sort of like a part of the government, but it became a commercial company when it acquired Telenor Satellite. But the DNA of the company is to exist for the ownership and operation of space infrastructure for Norway. And Norway is a very small country with 5.5 million people, but we have a maritime area of responsibility that is about 7 times the size of the country. All of our wealth comes from the ocean, whether that be oil and gas or fisheries. We're a country that's completely dependent on import and export, whether that's exporting sort of the metals and things that we produce, or importing a lot of the food that we eat. And not to mention that I think it's 30 to 40% of Europe's gas is now supplied from the Norwegian oil fields and gas fields. So we have a huge responsibility to take care of that area, and we like to call ourselves the eyes and ears of NATO in the north, being on the border with Russia. So the North Fleet has to sort of pass Norwegian waters in order to get into the Gap and into the Atlantic. So Norway's always had a really big responsibility for maritime domain awareness, and that's been a large part of Space Norway from the beginning. So the company was started when we took ownership of the fiber optic cable that connects KSAT on Svalbard to the mainland to get that data flow to customers. And then we also, through a subsidiary called Statsat, we operate all of the Norwegian national satellites for the maritime, what would it be, the Coastal Authority and the Norwegian Space Agency, and those provide AIS and other maritime domain awareness capabilities. And then for the last 10 years, we've been in close collaboration with the Norwegian Intelligence Service, developing a new type of non-cooperative maritime domain awareness solution for surveillance of actually the entire Norwegian area of responsibility and more. And that's sort of what I'm mainly working on today.
Yeah. So why has space infrastructure become increasingly important for the Arctic?
Well, I think we see a lot of increased activity in the Arctic, whether that be from defense, as we now see with the Russian buildup. We have and the counter buildup from the NATO allies. You have tourism is increasing into the area. It's becoming a very popular spot for maritime tourism. You have increased sort of resource, oil and gas, mineral sort of exploration and processing. You have increased shipping, especially as the ice melts and is projected to melt even further. We expect a lot more of commercial shipping to pass through that area. And the area is vast. Like it's a very large area, and it's in a very remote area. Even though there's a lot of traffic, there's not a lot of landmass and sort of places where you can put a shore-based radar, or you can easily fly marine surveillance aircraft and cover the entire area. So you're sort of dependent on things like space-based infrastructure in order to be able to create that surveillance. I think that's sort of it's a combination of sort of that increased activity, actually combined with the increased threats. I think is important to talk about, because we see increased gray zone and sort of below the threshold hybrid warfare things like blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline. We wouldn't want that to happen to the Norwegian oil and gas infrastructure. We have to protect from that. We see even nation states accusing each other of piracy and capturing each other's vessels. That's leading to increased distrust, and people are turning off AIS or spoofing AIS, and then you have this concept of shadow fleets.
Yes.
So all of these things combined is sort of creating this need for real-time persistent surveillance, and space is really the only way to achieve that.
Yeah, I think you more or less maybe answered the next question, because I was thinking Space Norway is developing what you call no vessel unseen. So how does satellite radar complement AIS?
Yeah, so AIS is inherently cooperative, so it relies on the active participation of the vessels from all nations to create that recognized maritime picture that people are aware of, like from maritime traffic or similar applications. The problem is there's an increased number of dark vessels that turn the AIS off, but also vessels that spoof and provide false information. We have vessels also flying under false information, whether that's a false flag, and or doing things that are in violation of sanctions. And we see ship-to-ship transfers, and we see shipments to illegal gas fields and things like the sanctioned gas fields and things like that. So you need a non-cooperative way as this lack of trust increases.
Yeah.
And radar provides that. Radar is an all-weather, day-night sort of capability that sort of can work up in the Arctic, where sort of many months of the year are completely dark. There's often bad weather, and when you combine that with AIS together, you create something similar to air traffic control. So the way we get situational awareness of, say, airspace is that we combine a passive cooperative beacon receiver with a search radar, and then by combining those two data sources, you're able to very quickly identify all of the traffic that is doing what it's supposed to do, and very quickly sort out the traffic that's sort of doing what it's not supposed to do. And that allows you then to focus the radar on those specific targets and gather even more information. So the solution we have is very similar. It combines the AIS with the search radar, and then once it's detected vessels that are not in correlation with AIS, it then uses a more targeted radar to gather more information at a sort of higher revisit and higher resolution. And that's sort of what it is. It's basically air traffic control, but turned on its head with the radars in the air or in space, and then creating a non-cooperative service radar or recognized maritime picture.
So I was just wondering, comparing to earlier, if you have any numbers, how significant are dark fleets and AIS spoofing as a challenge today?
Yeah, I've been trying to find that out myself for marketing purposes. The general consensus I seem to find is worldwide, it's about 5% of vessels are sort of operating either either flying false flags or sending false information, or just not being on AIS completely. In Norwegian waters, I've heard actually numbers up around 20%.
Yeah.
If you look at sort of a maritime heat map of traffic, nearly all the traffic going through the Arctic travels in the Norwegian sort of area of responsibility. So and there's just a huge amount of increase in the shadow fleet, shipping raw oil from Russia, but also increased defense activity, and those vessels definitely don't like to sort of transmit where they are. And so I think as trust erodes, and we get these multiple spheres of influence with the US, I guess, and then Asia and Russia, and then Europe, sort of centers of influence being in conflict with each other and distrusting each other, we'll see an increase in vessels turning off their AIS in fear of potentially being captured or prevented access. So my hypothesis is this is only going to now increase, and we have we see special points of interest like the Hormuz, the Strait of Hormuz. We see that the Panama Canal, the Gulf of America, all of these areas are becoming sort of increasingly conflicted, and in order to either evade a blockade or evade border patrol or evade sanctions enforcement, more and more ships, or even illegal fishing restrictions, vessels are turning off their AIS or spoofing their AIS. And so there's an increased need for this sort of non-cooperative capability.
Yeah. So, because much of the discussion, you touch also about other aspects. So much of the discussion is around maritime surveillance for and defense and security. And where do you see the greatest practical value for commercial shipping?
Yeah, well, I'm currently looking into that. Of course, this is a solution that was developed for defense and intelligence. But I think, getting back to my first or second answer, this sort of gray zone hybrid warfare that's happening now is more and more affecting civilian infrastructure. So whether that be energy infrastructure or logistic infrastructure, the attacks are sort of happening, not defense against defense. And I think civilian shipping is going to need to be more cognizant of potential security threats that are coming. I think the other way I think it's going to affect the commercial is in the insurance and assurance type products. With more and more vessels doing things they're not meant to be doing, I can only imagine that is increasing insurance sort of costs and things in general, because it's really hard to keep track of what's actually happening. So hopefully a product like No Vessel Unseen will be able to give insurance companies and assurance companies the data they need to provide the level of service that they were previously getting from, say, a cooperative environment with AIS.
Yeah. What developments in Earth observation and innovation excites you the most from a maritime perspective?
I think it's the combination of what we call sensor fusion, the combining data from multiple sources, whether that be spaceborne combined with airborne, combined with surface vessels or subsea vessels and sensors, and combining that with the growing amount of compute power that we're having. We're seeing these massive data centers being built with GPUs that can process large amounts of data, what we call high performance compute. And then on top of that, you have this AI, artificial intelligence layer. So when you combine all of those three, I think that's probably the most powerful, because one thing is collecting the data, but like just our satellites alone, they will collect terabytes of data every day. And currently that data is discarded. So a lot of the Earth observation data that comes down today is actually discarded, just from the lack of processing ability. So originally that was processed visually with the eyes, manually, and then a lot of the data just couldn't be processed in time to be of any value, so that was discarded. Then came machine-based processing, and that helped, but still a lot of the data is being thrown away. And even our system, we hope to sort of store data for maybe 12 days or something like that. But ideally, I would want to store the data indefinitely, because I think a lot of the insights we get and trend analysis that you can do on big data sets will be very valuable. But then it's just, how do you store that amount of data in a commercially viable way? There has to be someone willing to pay for the output. So I'm not sure. I'm hoping that I will find a business case to be able to keep that data and not throw it away, because I think that's where the value is going to come in the future. It's this ability to process huge amounts of data and learn things that the human intelligence isn't able to sort of comprehend in any valuable time frame.
Okay. Simon, thanks a lot for your insights and joining me at the HANSA Newscast.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to HANSA Newscast. Subscribe now for more insights and stories from the world of shipping. And feel free to visit HANSA.news and sign up for the HANSA newsletter to stay up to date. And hey, see you at the next episode. Bye.